I've never been the kind of guy who seeks out trouble. I'm the guy who mows his lawn every Saturday morning, who brings his trash cans in before the garbage truck comes, and who always makes a point to say hello to the neighbors when I see them out walking their dogs. I like peace. I like routine. I like the sense of security that comes with knowing you've done your part to keep your home neat, safe, and welcoming. But sometimes, without warning, that very sense of security gets turned on its head, and you find yourself fighting battles you never imagined possible. It all started with something so ridiculously trivial. You'd think I was making it up. A camera. A tiny $30 security camera I impulsively bought off Amazon during a weekend sale. It wasn't some high-tech, industrial-strength gadget. No, it was just a basic little weatherproof model with night vision and cloud backup. A gadget designed to be simple, discreet, and affordable. I mounted it above my front door, carefully tucking it into the trim so that it blended in, hoping that its unobtrusive presence would help me keep an eye on my property without altering the look of my house. I thought, better safe than sorry, especially when I'd started noticing packages going missing from my porch. At first, it was just a few minor hiccups, a box of coffee pods here, a small kitchen gadget there. I figured it was a simple mix-up with a delivery service or an honest mistake by the mail carrier. But then, one day, I ordered a new pair of running shoes. Nice ones, mind you, not the bargain bin kind, but shoes I've been saving for because I've been trying to get back into shape. The delivery notification popped up on my phone, and I felt a small thrill as I imagined unboxing my new gear. When I stepped outside after my next Zoom call, however, there was nothing. Not even a sign that a package had been there. That was the third time in 1 month that something had vanished without a trace. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The idea that someone might be repeatedly stealing from me gnawed at me. I had always prided myself on being a reasonable person, the sort who doesn't jump to conclusions. But after that third incident, I decided I had to do something. I bought that camera, a simple adhesive-mounted, plug-and-play device that promised to capture everything on my porch. I set it up with minimal fuss, and even took a moment to admire how neatly it integrated with my home's exterior. I thought it was a smart, harmless move, a little extra insurance, in an increasingly unpredictable world. Then, almost 2 days later, I received a certified letter. Not an email, not a sticky note on my door, but a proper, formal letter that immediately made my heart sink. The letter bore the ominous title, Violation of Covenant Section 14B, Unauthorized Exterior Modifications. I opened it slowly, rereading the message to make sure I hadn't misread anything. There, in crisp, unyielding print, was a photo of my little camera, zoomed in so dramatically that it looked as if I'd committed some serious transgression. Red circles and arrows pointed directly at the device, and the letter warned me that my installation compromised the visual harmony of the neighborhood. I was given 48 hours to remove the camera, or face daily fines of $500. I couldn't help but laugh out loud when I read the fine amount. $500 a day for a device that cost less than what I'd spent on dinner last week. I thought it was a mistake, some clerical error, or an overzealous board member with too much power. I immediately wrote an email to the HOA board, explaining my predicament in calm, rational terms. I detailed the multiple package thefts, explained that the camera was small, discreet, and entirely non-invasive, and even attached a short clip showing someone casually approaching the porch, grabbing a package, and disappearing into the neighborhood. I offered to paint the camera the same color as my trim if that would appease their aesthetic sensibilities. But my email was met with silence. No acknowledgement, no discussion, nothing. The very next day, I received another letter. This one was shorter, more curt. Violation persists. Daily fines accruing. It was as if I were dealing with a faceless bureaucracy that cared little for reason or the actual circumstances of my case. I began to feel like I was locked in a battle with an institution that was determined to enforce its rules regardless of common sense. Determined to get some answers, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. I figured that if I could present my case face-to-face, I might be able to at least get them to listen. The meeting was held at the local clubhouse, a building that reeked of stale coffee and the faint odor of disinfectant. its halls lined with outdated motivational posters and old, unused gym equipment. There were about 20 people in attendance, mostly board members and a handful of longtime residents. At the head of the room sat Carol Something, the HOA president, whose perpetually stern expression suggested that she'd never smiled at a neighbor in her life. When my turn finally came, I stood up, took a deep breath, and explained everything. I told them about the stolen packages, about how I had installed a modest security camera purely for safety reasons. I showed them the footage, the clear, unedited video of a hooded figure casually snatching a package from my porch. I even offered a compromise. I would repaint the camera to match the house if that would help. But Carol didn't even bother to look up from her papers. She merely stated, in a tone as flat as a deflated balloon, regardless of your intent, the modification violates community design standards. If we make an exception for you, we'd have to allow everyone to deface their property. Deface? I thought incredulously. It's a camera, not a neon sign screaming, I belong here. Yet she continued, droning on about how visible surveillance devices created a hostile environment and eroded the neighborhood's charm. I couldn't help but think of the odd contraptions in other houses, like the resident 2 streets over who had installed solar-powered garden gnomes that actually sang holiday tunes all year round. Apparently, my little camera was the only one that disturbed the delicate balance of aesthetics in our community. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about security or even about preventing theft. This was about power, a power trip that the HOA board was on, enforcing arbitrary rules to maintain an illusion of perfection and control. I decided then that I wasn't going to back down without digging deeper into what was really going on. After that fateful meeting, I started researching. I combed through public records, dug up old meeting minutes, and pored over every clause in the HOA bylaws I could get my hands on. I even spoke with several neighbors who had quietly expressed their frustrations over the years. What I uncovered was a labyrinth of secret amendments and backdoor deals. 6 months before my little camera debacle, the board had quietly passed an amendment banning non-approved surveillance devices unless they were installed by a certified partner. And who was that certified partner? It turned out to be a private security company with a direct connection to the board, a company owned by the brother-in-law of the vice president of the HOA. I felt a burning mix of anger and disbelief. The same people who were now threatening to fine me $500 a day for a harmless device were the ones profiting off a mandatory upgrade to a $700 system, complete with a monthly monitoring fee. And I wasn't alone. I discovered that 6 other homeowners had been hit with similar fines for installing their own cameras. They were all coerced into abandoning their personal security measures in favor of the official system, a system that, as I soon learned, was more about lining the pockets of the board's cronies than about protecting the residents. With every new piece of evidence, my determination grew. I began to meticulously document everything: emails, official letters, meeting transcripts, and even casual conversations with neighbors who shared their own horror stories about the HOA's overreach. I recorded phone calls with the security company, and during one call, I caught a representative off guard. In a moment of unguarded chatter, he mentioned a referral deal between the company and the HOA, a connection that solidified my suspicions about the board's hidden agenda. It wasn't long before I got lucky. One of my neighbors, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Janet, worked for the state attorney general's office. When I laid out the evidence for her, her reaction was immediate and intense. She told me that I wasn't just dealing with an overly strict set of guidelines. This was a clear case of abuse of power and potential corruption. Janet connected me with the right people in the legal department who specialized in consumer rights and HOA disputes. Suddenly, what had started as a personal struggle turned into a full-blown campaign for justice. The HOA, sensing that I was not going to back down quietly, escalated their efforts. A lien notice arrived in the mail, warning that because I hadn't paid the accrued fines, which had ballooned to $3,000, they would take steps to collect the money, including placing a lien on my home. I've never had a speeding ticket in over a decade, and now here I was being threatened with losing the home I'd invested so much in, all over a $30 camera. That was the final straw. I filed formal complaints with the State Department of Consumer Affairs and our county's HOA Oversight Committee. I also decided to take my story public. I posted everything online, carefully redacted documents, photos of the letters, screenshots of emails, and the footage from my camera. I didn't mention any names or addresses. I simply laid out the facts, allowing the truth to speak for itself. The response was overwhelming. My story went viral. People from all over the area, and even from other states, shared their own experiences with overreaching HOAs. Comments and messages poured in, many recounting similar encounters, some offering legal advice, and others simply expressing their solidarity and outrage. It was as if I had tapped into a deep, underlying vein of frustration that many had kept hidden for too long. Then, almost as if by fate, a local news station reached out. They wanted to do a story on the HOA war that was seemingly erupting in our community. I was interviewed on my porch with a camera capturing not only the footage of the theft, but also the quiet dignity of a man who had been pushed to his limit. The reporter's voice was sympathetic, and the segment painted a vivid picture of an everyday homeowner standing up to an oppressive system. The piece even included a clip of Carol from the HOA board, trying to explain away the situation as a miscommunication. Her tone was measured and rehearsed, but it did nothing to quell the growing anger among the residents. After the news story aired, the tide began to turn. More and more neighbors came forward with their own grievances. It wasn't just about surveillance cameras. It was about a pattern of behavior where the board used fines and arbitrary rules to force residents into costly upgrades, all while turning a blind eye to their own conflicts of interest. I learned that Carol herself had a camera. Yes, the same brand as mine, mounted on her back porch. When questioned, she claimed it was grandfathered in, as if that somehow absolved her of responsibility. The community meeting following the news segment was unlike any I'd ever attended. The turnout was massive. People who'd previously sat silently in the back now filled every available seat. They came armed with printed emails, copies of the bylaws, and detailed records of their own experiences. The energy in the room was palpable, a mixture of righteous anger and hope. It was a turning point. By the end of the meeting, 3 board members, including Carol, had resigned in a flurry of public outrage and protest. An interim board was swiftly put in place, and Janet, the very neighbor who had helped me connect with the legal side of things, was elected as a representative on the new board. With the new board taking charge, the fines were dropped, and the lien on my home was lifted. More importantly, the bylaws were revised to allow for discrete personal security devices, as long as they didn't intrude into neighbors' yards or damage any shared property. Finally, common sense had prevailed. Even now, 6 months later, I keep that little camera up, not just as a tool for security, but as a reminder of the day I stood up for myself, and for all of us, against a system that had tried to dictate every aspect of our lives. Every time I glance at it, I remember how something so small can become the catalyst for change. It's a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of community. Even when you feel like you're just one person against a faceless institution, know that your voice matters. I share my story not to boast, but to remind you that if you're ever pushed into a corner by rules that make no sense, or if you ever feel like an HOA or any authority is overstepping its bounds, don't be afraid to speak up. Ask questions. Document everything. Reach out to your neighbors. In a world where power can often be abused by those in charge, solidarity and the courage to tell your truth are your greatest weapons. And so here I am. I fought the HOA, and not only did I keep my camera, my little beacon of resistance, but I helped ignite a movement that reminds us that our homes are our sanctuaries, and that no amount of red tape or petty fines can take away our right to feel safe and respected in the place we call home. If you think that a $500 a day fine over a security camera is the most absurd thing you've ever heard, just imagine the countless stories out there of neighbors being bullied into submission by overreaching rules and hidden agendas. I urge you to listen, share your own experiences, and stand up when something doesn't feel right. Because when neighbors unite, even the most entrenched power structures crumble. Every day, I watch that little camera silently record the world around me, a constant reminder of what we can accomplish when we refuse to be intimidated by authority. It's more than just a security device. It's a symbol of our collective stand for fairness, transparency, and the unyielding right to protect our homes on our own terms. So if you've ever felt that prickling sense of injustice, that nagging feeling that someone's been watching your back, figuratively or literally, remember my story. It might just inspire you to take a stand of your own. And if you ever find yourself facing an HOA nightmare or any situation where the rules are being used to control rather than protect, know that you're not alone. Together, we can demand accountability, fairness, and a community where every voice is heard. This is my story. It's raw, it's real, and it's a reminder that sometimes the smallest things, a $30 camera, a missing package, a silent piece of technology, can spark the biggest changes. So here's to standing up, speaking out, and never letting anyone dictate how you protect your own piece of the world. Thank you for listening, and remember, the next time you see a tiny camera on a porch, it might just be the start of something much bigger than you ever imagined.